Five, four, three, two, one. We are live on another Friday, another show, the Tech Behind FinTech. I am really excited today to have my guest, Ryan Peterson, on today's show, where we'll be discussing IT management challenges faced by private equity firms during COVID. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting
Excellent.
me.
Excellent. No problem at all. I'm extremely happy to have you. So, like always, before we get into it, we have to talk about Ryan's bio. So let's get excited. Ryan is the information systems manager for Green Courte Partners, a real estate private equity firm in Chicago. He has over 12 years of IT management experience, specifically with mission-based organizations spanning Chicago, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. Ryan graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts in Humanity from Sherman College, a Master of Arts in Communication from the European Graduate School, and a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology Security from Western Governors University. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Happy to be on.
Excellent, excellent. So, let's just set the agenda of all our shows. This is a Tech Behind FinTech, where we really talk about the technology behind the finance industry. Today, we're going to be going more into the private equity side of things with Ryan and his expertise. Like all our shows, we start with a bit of news and we get Ryan's take on it, and then we move into our topic of the day, which will be the IT management challenges faced by PE firms during COVID. So, on that note, the first news topic that I want to touch on, ironically, came out of the Chicago Tribune, ironically, because Ryan's based in the Chicago area. And the title was, "Could Amazon Start a Bank?" So, let's give some background on that. Basically, the FDIC opened the door on Tuesday, approved the final rule governing the so-called industrial loan companies that will allow major businesses to sync banking charters while escaping capital and liquidity demands faced by dedicated financial firms. So let's just give some background on that. An ILC, industrial loan company or industrial bank, is a financial institution in the United States that lends money and may be owned by non-financial institutions. ILCs have been around since 1987. They experienced a lot of growth around that time due to the Banking Holding Company Act passed by Congress, freeing companies from businesses restrictions faced by traditional lenders and supervision by the Federal Reserve. In 2007, they imposed a moratorium on ILCs when Walmart tried to become a bank. After the Dodd-Frank Act, it was on hold for 3 years. Till 2013. So now, since 2017, there's been a pickup. So there is actually a Japanese online retailer called Rakuten, and they put an application in, and based on that application, if it goes through, it can set a precedent for every other big tech company, including Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc. So really interesting stuff. One last comment on that news article before we get Ryan's take on it. So by Steve Hall, a legal director of Better Markets, he says the FDIC is violating the cardinal rule established almost 70 years ago that banking and commerce should remain separate. He also said those combinations cannot be adequately supervised. They pose instability risk, and they can even foster unfair competition. Ryan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean that what you just said, right? I mean, I think it's concerning. I mean, is that are we gonna get our items faster? Is that the proposition? I mean, like what? I'm not sure what the value. I mean, obviously money, right? I mean, more money for them, concentrating, more services under that one umbrella. But yeah, I mean, I agree that doesn't sound like a good idea, right? On its face,
What we're seeing right now, especially we covered this a couple of weeks ago with Google moving into Google Pay space and working as a partner to certain smaller banks for their payment app. We're seeing this infiltration by big tech into the financial markets. I mean, I know when I was consulted at other bigger firms, the whole idea was we don't want to become Blockbuster. That was a theme, right? Because they're seeing non-financial players come into this industry and basically eat their lunch. So,
Yeah,
it's the interconnectivity, because on the Google article, now, you can get certain things in your Gmail account. Everything's interconnected.
yeah,
So
sure.
Amazon knows our dirty little secrets, right? They know all the stuff that
Right,
we buy, all the
right,
books that we read.
right.
So it's interesting. I know with the Google side, they mentioned having walls between certain departments. So, as it expands, it definitely, like I said, it seems interesting the way things are going.
Right.
I'm pro tech, even though I work in finance. I like technology, so it's
Mhm.
always interesting for me to see the different use cases around those issues.
Sure.
Yep. What were you about to say?
No, I mean, it makes sense. I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, right. And Google's a great example, I guess, of, right, simplifying then I guess what you're delivering and integrating, right? I guess integrating is the term used. And I guess that's right. I think, but you're right. I mean, there's got to be concerns right there with, monopolization, all that kind of jazz. And like, it's, I think we have to be very careful. And I think, we see that. I think collectively, I think folks are seeing that, there's a lot of, precedents are established, the dangers of, again, monopolization, too much concentration in one entity. And again, it's great. Also, I agree with you that it is awesome that you can go open your Google Photos app or whatever app it is, right, and kind of execute transactions as if it were just like, a couple swipes and a touch. And I guess this is all part of the backbone, right, of making that happen. But it's, yeah.
And another aspect is looking at the unbanked. So there's a population of people that don't globally that don't have banks, but they do use these technology services. So having these types of infiltration from technology firms into this industry can really maybe even I'm going to say even the playing field out, but
Sure.
definitely they can see opportunities so they can start leveraging different banking. I know, for instance, it was a news article we covered a few weeks ago with we keep bringing this up because it's relevant to all of these topics. Facebook, right? Facebook owns WhatsApp.
Of course.
They're moving towards the WhatsApp Pay and different things of that nature.
Right.
I mean, India and Brazil, which are their two biggest markets. So you would figure some of those people, or some of those in populations, may not have traditional bank accounts that we're accustomed to.
Right.
So the exchange of commerce and seeing how that works, totally find interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I mean, we'll have to watch. See, I mean, that's great. That's a great example, I think. Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? Because in a way, it's like you said, it's even in the playing field, I think, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a component of that, but there's also a component of them, again, like exerting, you know what I mean, like power in ways that I think people
world domination.
Yeah,
over, right? They owe you, right? It's like one of those futuristic movies you used to watch back in the days, that like this one giant organization controls the world and governments and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Our next topic of the day is got to jump into crypto real briefly. Bitcoin hit a record high on Thursday of 23,400. Totally amazing. What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Like, so personally, I haven't. That's not something I've really stayed close to. I have a lot of friends, colleagues who really do, right? And I mean, I think I watched it at its inception, right? So I know a little bit of like what and how it started, right? And that, but I don't really follow it, like, I got it like as a market or something, right? It is fascinating to me that it continues to, defy what I think, right, generally experts were predicting, over the past several years, right? So that's interesting to me, but it's not something I like follow closely, right?
No, I don't know worries at all. I know with me, it's more so from a professional organization standpoint with the CSA, and not looking at the crypto aspect, but looking at more so of the business use cases in finance with the blockchain and just ways to secure that. We're talking about smart contracts and things of that nature. The CSA stands for Cloud Security Alliance. So that's like different banks and different businesses are a part of that. So just follow it from that aspect. Definitely. It's one of those fear of missing out, hindsight's 2020 with Bitcoin. Obviously, we all could have been quazillionaires if we bought it back in 07, 08, but it was like a penny or two. But you missed the boat in these things. Right. So those are actually the news topics I had for today. I wanted to jump into our discussion of the day. So we're going to get into the IT challenges faced by private equity firms during COVID, and I think before we jump into the technology aspect, we should probably just give a high level overview of the business because certain aspects could then impact our technology discussion. So I guess the first question to discuss is like, what is private equity? So from a high level overview, right? We have a situation where you have investors, usually referred to as general partners. They could have a multitude of funds or a fund within their business. They now seek institutional investors or accredited investors, which are just very rich people, right? So the institutional side of it, though, you're talking about companies that are pensions, mutual funds, insurance companies. So if you have a pension, you could probably be indirectly invested in a private equity fund. So now, in looking at it, you have the general partners. Those institutional investors within the context of the private equity are called limited partners. Now, in order to conduct their business, they obviously need performance fees, which usually industry wide is 20%, and then management fees, which is 2% of the funds committed that people said they were going to invest, and that 2% you're now using for your overhead for all your employees, your IT, and everything of that nature. And just to give another high level, from a business, in the 80s they used to call it like LBOs, leverage buyouts, right? And how some of them work is, let's say that you're looking at an asset or private equity, meaning it's not public, it's not traded on the open markets, it's private. It could be a business, it could be whatever private asset. Let's say that asset is 10 million. Usually, on a deal like a leveraged buyout, the private equity guys will raise about 1 million of that, so 10%. Then the 9 million they'll finance, but use the actual asset that they're buying as collateral for that financing effort. So now they have the 1 million plus the 9 from the bank. That's the collateral is the asset, so it's not on them personally. They buy this asset. Now, over time, the goal is to basically make updates to that asset, figure out how to optimize it, make it more efficient. Let's say they do that over the years. Then they eventually now sell that for, let's say, 20 million. They pay back the 9 plus interest. That remaining chunk, they get a 20% industry standard performance fee, and they keep it moving. So outside of that, right, when you talk about funds, now some of them have, obviously they have capital calls and investment commitments from their investors. So let's say now from a management fee, and I want to touch base on this management fee because I think it's a good segue into the challenges that's faced in that industry. That management fee is 2%. So if you have a $1 million fund, which is extremely low, that's not really heard of, that's $2,000. If you have a $100 million fund, that's $2 million. If you have a $500 million fund, $10 million. You have a $1 billion fund, $20 million management fee. We're not going to get into the details in the news around sometimes the management fee, if it's a bad performing year, will be more than the performance. We're not going to get into that, but I want you to understand the management fee aspect because now you're working basically to handle your staff, which from a typical organization, you have the people that deal with the actual investors that invested in your fund, their investor relations, and you're dealing with now the people looking for new assets. That's more the deal side, acquisitions, things of that nature. So, and then you have obviously the IT guys that put that all together and manage it, but you're working with that management fee. Ryan, anything to add on that I may have missed?
No, probably better stated than I could say, right? But yes, that is my understanding as well from where I sit. That's correct.
All right, I appreciate that. Now, based on that, so now look at the market, right? We're working with a fixed management fee, and now we have to not only pay our employees, office space, bills, everything of that nature to keep the actual business running, the private equity business, not talking about the assets they buy that's going to be considered their portfolio companies. We're going to get into that. Now we have to manage it. Now, all of a sudden, COVID hits. Things are going, as we know, we're working from home, working remote, a lot of changes. And that's why we have Ryan from an industry perspective to start talking about some of the challenges that he sees. Ryan's part of different private equity, professional organizations in which he sees different problems. Obviously, he has his own personal experiences, but we want to talk from an industry level and get his expertise, get his take. So the first one, Ryan, shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and this is not specific to, PE, right? But certainly, PE brings with it its own challenges, as you've kind of already, shared, at least from a background kind of. What the primarily, right, and this is, I'm sure, consistent with many IT directors and leaders I've talked to can, second this, right, is that like when we went into lockdown, our organization was not, from an IT, architecture standpoint, we weren't really built for work from home, right? We had a certain segment of our network, right, an infrastructure dedicated to allowing remote users in, but that was not, it wasn't designed, right, for the entire company. So, right out of the gate, all of this happened fairly quickly for a lot of folks, right? And I think
for everyone,
right. I mean, you had weeks. If you were lucky, you had weeks, right? But it even felt like there was less time than that. I felt like we really had a week, in a certain sense, to like, okay, guys, we have to get all of our staff, right, ready to work from home. And so, what does that mean, for how we serve up, the IT resources and assets that we serve up, right? And thankfully, we had. Prior to that, and I shouldn't say, thankfully, but I think as part of a roadmap, a roadmap I see for many and I've overseen for many previous organizations was to get, email, right, and other resources into Office 365, right? Which, when I came into Green Courte Partners, we were running Exchange, right, on-prem. So, trying to maintain that in a COVID work from home would have been there would have been a lot more, right, complexity. To remotely managing, right, Exchange from a data center that's not, it's a small data center, right? To even use the term data center is probably, not accurate to the size of what we have, right? Again, we're 50, 60 people in, downtown Chicago. We do have some other folks, right, as part of the PE challenge, right, from, like a management company that we own that are also coming into our infrastructure, right? So, it's an infrastructure that was designed for, like, again, let's just say like 60 people who work from the office, and now you have 60 people, plus the others, right? Again, from Florida, we have a Florida office, right? You add that all up, and you have to serve it up, and it's not, that's not a lot of users, but you have to get that right, because you have, and so what we first experienced, right, when we went remote was, everyone starts hammering the user VPN, right? And we have to start scaling resources to that, right? And this is it's not totally virtualized, right? It's not like the VPN appliance and what we're serving up is virtualized in AWS or Azure, right? Like, so we have to scale up a physical appliance, right? That's, in our data center, as well as, of course, reconfigure the network, right? And subnets, right? To get into some more IT, right? Networking engineering, right? To accommodate a complete swing from what was originally like maybe we would have 5 people working remotely, right, and coming in to everyone working remotely, being able to get on that, right, get on domain and access those resources. And to this day, we still that is a common ticket that we get, right, that our support side will get, right, that our help desk gets, right, is maybe you get on the VPN, but I can't see the file share, right, that kind of stuff.
When I was at some other organizations and having to remote, I mean, that was sometimes a thing outside of COVID. I'm talking like
sure,
other bigger clients. It's just you get onto the VPN. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes you can't log in. Sometimes once you get in, you don't have access to all of the resources. So now, and that wasn't 100% of the workforce being remote. That was, I don't know, a snowstorm. And some people couldn't get in, and it was just like a higher volume than normal. So, it's interesting. And to what you said with different offices. So we're not only talking about internal offices, we're also talking about portfolio companies, because now that has to be taken into consideration in terms of access and different things like that.
That's right. And that has its challenges, as you've already stated, right? It has its challenges regardless of work from home, right? Lockdown scenarios. So, it's not a challenge that we can't overcome, but what it does is, like, I think I was telling someone the other day, it's like, let's say you had a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, right? In terms of getting resources from, maybe on premise to the cloud. And that's just being, conservative, right? Like, it could get done quicker than that. But let's say you have a 3-year plan, right? As an example, COVID hits, that 3-year plan may have to be accelerated, right? And I think in a lot of cases it would be, right? So a 3-year plan is now condensed to 1 year. It's condensed to 6 months, right? Because, what are you going to do, right? And so again, we're smaller, but in theory, the theory kind of applies here that if you have too many people hitting these resources and you can't serve them up, they're not available 100% of the time because you're not architected for that. You have to re-architect, right? And part of that re-architecting and as part of our roadmap was to move these resources to the cloud, right? So you may have a 1 or 3 year plan to do so. Now you have a 1 year, or less plan, right? You have to kind of accelerate that plan. And that's a challenge, right? I mean, you want to be methodical, right? You want to do these things in methodical way.
No, I mean, that's interesting. And I want to read you a stat so we could just see what's going on overall industry perspective. I think it's from like SP Global. I got this. I'm going to read this real quick. On average, 40% of participants indicated that more than half of their portfolio companies had business continuity plans in place before the outbreak of COVID-19, with APAC, Asia Pacific, respondents reporting the highest percentage of 50%. Then it goes on to say, strikingly, North American-based portfolio companies were the least prepared for serious business disruption. Half of respondents and 46% of North America said that less than 25% of their portfolio companies had business contingency plans. So that means 75% did not have any contingency plans from a North American PE industry's perspective from these respondents. So, that's catastrophic. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
So I mean, and COVID definitely is business continuity plans. So from hearing your description, one of the factors that helped solve the problem was definitely some software as a service solutions like a Microsoft 365, migrating that to the cloud. So that's one thing. What was successful in your case was these roadmaps were already in place. So it wasn't a situation where COVID hit. Oh, what do we have to do? What do we have to figure out?
Right.
From hearing that, the lesson, and obviously it applies to outside of PE, right, is to constantly be on the lookout for how to optimize and efficiency and keep your fingers on the pulse of technology, I would say. Because if it wasn't, right, and you were just, it was just exchanged all this time, it would be a huge problem right now.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, not to use like these kind of pithy acronyms and things like that, but like the KTLO, let's just keep the lights running, right? It's working kind of mentality. That is one that I have encountered in many spaces in my professional life would simply not suffice, right? And I think that would be another avenue, right? Like you said, to survey and see like how many folks may have to swing from that kind of philosophy or practice, if you will, to whoa, wait, the cloud was this idea, right, if you will, right? And we're still, kind of on the fence, right? Due to whatever reason, suddenly becomes potentially the difference between running your business, right? At all, right? But I would argue, more to the extent like efficiently, right? With less disruption, right? With less, less of the issues that we know come with like, kind of standard on smaller data center setups, right?
I think from looking at an industry, obviously the focus is on the business, right? At the end of the day, money's made by the deals. The management fee is just it's an overhead. It's really on the performance fee. So if that's the way the money's made, that means, okay, we need investors, we need to find new deals. And sometimes IT takes a backseat to that. It's just more so supported. But in this case, obviously, what is it called? The black swan, they call it, when it's just some event that no one could have actually anticipated, right? Like COVID was that thing. Right. But you can probably see now the impact it would have on those assets. Like if you have a portfolio company and you haven't sold yet, you're somewhat responsible for that now. And if the contingency plan's not there, there's not a plan to basically migrate it. And like you said, even at this point, keeping the lights on because of the situation we find ourselves, then your business is impacted negatively. I would say. Not from an and I have some questions on that. Like now, from an IT management perspective, one of the things, and I've even made videos about this, the endpoints, right? Like it's always a fear of mine looking at it from a management perspective. People using personal devices at home that they use for their kids Zoom,
Right.
right? And now they're using for like sensitive. Now you're also managing sensitive PII high number data. It's a lot of stuff going on, right? And you're using also to manage your grocery list and whatever else. That always, from a security perspective, kind of rubbed me the wrong way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, geez, like again, like prior to COVID, I mean, with the explosive growth of SaaS, right? In 365, just using just as a kind of like your sample stack. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's hard enough to manage, right? Without converging, right, as it were, a lot of those devices into a home space, right, where they're not coming back on domain, right? So you really do have to be. That again is obviously a space where you have to be prepared, right? You have to have the right systems in place to manage that, right? And I think that's not the case for everyone. We certainly we have some good tools in place, right? I'm glad, and I think a lot of that was again part of a roadmap to do so in general, right? That's paying off, and the dividends there are paying off, and that with folks at home now, it's absolutely mandatory that we have some sort of endpoint protection. We still need to extend it, right? We need to extend it, as you say, to devices that we aren't professionally, of course, or as a business, right, putting into the user's hands, right? So yeah, there's a lot of different options, and I think that can also be somewhat challenging. But I think it simply has to be done now, right? You have to start really getting into MDM a little bit more, the intricacies of that a little bit more than you might have had to previously, right?
I want to run something past you, because something I also brought up in a previous, not a link. So I not only LinkedIn lives, but I also do like the shorter videos that are just for consumption. The idea of basically having PCs virtualized, right? Whether it's using an Azure solution, an AWS solution, and from any dummy terminal, you can log onto the network. I can control egress, ingress. I can control that entire network. I control what data goes in, what you can run, but it's basically your PC in the cloud, right? And, I was thinking about it, talking to clients about it prior to COVID. COVID hit, obviously, world changed, everybody's scrambling. But I always like that idea more so. I mean, you have to manage your expenses, because obviously it's not free. But
Sure.
now I could contain all of my risk, contain those PCs. I know what's going in. I don't care where you log in from, because I know once you're there, I have control over my network virtually. What are your thoughts on that type of setup?
It's always been exciting to me, and it's also one of those things that we kind of joke about, is like that's kind of a return to the way things were, right? And I find that kind of fascinating, right? I think it has its place, right? It has its place. I think you have to, you have to run that across how you run your business, right? And how users are working on their endpoints, what kind of resources and applications, and if you can scale a virtual, right, machine, desktop, right, to meet those demands, then I think it's great. I think you're right that you have to get the cost right, and we know that that's a notorious. People notoriously swing and miss on that, right? Like they get out there and they're like, "Oh, right, this is great, man!" Like now we're back to the 1970s model of work,
server.
Right. And then they see the bill, right, from AWS, and like, what is this? Like, how did we get this, right? And there's complexities there, of course, and challenges. It's a shifting of complexities and challenges, right? From maybe. Right, and in this regard, I'm totally on board, right? Because if you shift the complexities and challenges, like say to use like your OSI model from like layer 2 kind of stuff, and I see this all the time, right? That we're gonna solve our problems by physical devices, right? Throw them out there, right? Throw them out there. You get complexities and challenges there, right? That I feel are actually greater, right? Or harder to control, right? Than the ones that you might get, right? The ones you will get when you shift, right? To a model wherein everyone is working at an application layer, right, through virtualized setups, right? So, again, how are you staffing that, right? How are you staffing those challenges, right? Do you have the right staff to meet that new challenge versus the guys, again, and girls who are trained to do layer two, right? Physical device type hardware support troubleshooting. That's to me where you go. But I like it. Yeah, I think that's the right move. And I think from, at least from an administrative, right?
Yep.
From an IT control and administrative standpoint, and with security being everything as we know, that's the right move.
I mean, and it's interesting because sometimes we depend on these applications and management. And then I know with like the big news this week is the SolarWinds, right? So, I'm getting your software, I'm using it, I'm not thinking it's compromised. Now all of a sudden I'm impacted because of a software of a supply chain issue. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Moving on to another one of your other points that you mentioned on a team aspect now. Can you go into that, another challenge? And I think that's overall was point 3 that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's a softer one, right? And I think that, and that's kind of how I mentioned it to you, right? I said it's not strictly IT. Certainly, this applies to everyone, but I just notice it. We notice it ourselves, right, within IT, and I think it's, it's an interesting challenge, right? I think being on these kind of calls, right, via Zoom, et cetera, it's clear it's been adequate, right? But emphasizing the word adequate, like I think, there's a lot that's missing, right, when we're not. When we're not meeting as a team together, right? When we're not, and probably even more critical is that we're not, you're not walking across. I think I mentioned that to you. You're not walking across the business, right, the organization, and talking to other people. And sometimes just those encounters where they're not necessarily planned, right, or maybe they're ad hoc planned, but they're so vital to understanding what other people are doing in their challenges, right? And I think it's harder to get to that through Teams chats, right? Which are, what's the terms now? Is it the asynchronous, right, versus synchronous, right? Like that whole kind of rhythm, right, is disruptive, right, to, I think, smoother kind of understandings and workflows that get us from problems, challenges to solutions, right, to just, strong and real collaboration, right, as opposed to these kind of punctuated, right, let's have a meeting at this time, punctuated chats, just the whole way chats come, just that whole flow is just difficult to manage across a spectrum of services, support, and just daily things that you do, right? So
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I literally just had a conversation yesterday with a CEO from a cybersecurity firm, and his thing was that team building, the just the idea of, like, I know you've had experience like this. I have too, right? We're technical people by background, by nature. So sometimes we get into a problem and we'll just start trying to solve it ourselves. We're not really asking for help because even though we're struggling with it, but we just know that it's just part of the game, right? Like you gotta go through it. And sometimes, like, walking out of your office or your cubicle, going to a coffee break, you might run into someone who might have done that before. He goes, "Oh, what's going on?" You tell them, "Oh no, do this and a third," and you get an answer, you get some feedback, but you're not going to do that from home per se, right? You're just going to try to look. I have to figure this out. I'm going to just stay and figure it out, and I'm going to try to solve it. So, and one of the things that he did was he was talking about in the summertime. He met his team at parks. Like, so he would say, "Listen, let's meet at a park. Let's meet at this open air space. And whether you're a consultant, whether you're an employee, I want to meet everybody, and let's just have a conversation. Let's see what's going on." And that hour or so was on me. And that was his thing. He was big on that. Let's like open air. Obviously, you want people to feel safe, but still trying to get that face to face time. So that was interesting. But to your point, right? It's not something that is PE specific. I think businesses across are going through that because. Correct. But looking at something like a private equity, or you look at the finance where IT is so sometimes intricate to the business, right? Because the business, they're using your solutions to do analysis, to drive their actions. And sometimes from an IT perspective, getting that interaction with the business is important outside of, I have a challenge, I have a problem, but more so like I want to, if I could understand your business better, I can provide a better solution.
Sure.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's like organic, you know. I mean, again, I think it's interesting being in tech, right? Like you said, the kind of engineering tech and being in tech that like tech is now everything, right? I mean, not
Yeah.
that it wasn't before, right? Clearly, the trajectory for tech is that it's everywhere and it's becoming a part of everything we do. But the fact that now we have to use it to even talk, right? I think is, I mean, it's clearly been that has been that has been happening. It's not new, right? But I think like what COVID, right? Like what was the term used about like this event that happens, right? I call it the Great Revealer, right? That's the term I've called it, the Great Revealer, right? And I think it reveals that this movement in within tech in general, right, to kind of like with email and chat and phone and whatever, what have you, right? That now, where we are is that we can't even like everything we do, right, has to run through that. And that to me is kind of what I said, meeting at a park, right? What technology is in play at that point, right? I mean, there is still some, right? To be fair, whatever, if we go back to like a Grecian definition of techne, right? But it's that to me is important, right? And the fact that everything we're running, it has an impact on everything that happens, right? Without getting into details, but it does, and I think we've been somewhat oblivious to that. But it's hard to be so now, right? Because how many people get frustrated, right, when their Zoom call doesn't work, right? And then it becomes clear that everything you're doing, it hinges on the ability for that platform, right, to run in a data center somewhere, right?
I mean, even to add to that, or when your Zoom call gets compromised, because we've seen that happen. I mean, I've heard countless stories of some third party hopping on Zoom and just putting porn up, something crazy. You're like, whoa. And she literally said, I had to stop the call. I just ended it. Like I just shut everything down because obviously somebody an unknown actor came in and was putting graphic materials on her Zoom call. So it's insane when you think about it, because last year we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, right.
It's inconceivable in nature, but I mean, these things are happening. The last point you make, I know we're a little bit over. You meant manageability support, onboarding and offboarding remotely. You want to get into that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one, right? And I think we adapted to that. We had to adapt and adopt to a new way to do this, right? So like, you can't see it on my camera. This is where I work, right? This is basically.
I can tell.
You can see I got like whiteboard. I put stuff on a whiteboard, like.
And I appreciate the fact you have a whiteboard. Yeah. I have one too. I would have to shift my whole camera around to show you, but I'm not going to do that. Just take my word for it. Yeah. I appreciate the fact you have a whiteboard.
Yeah, it's vital, right? I mean, that's one of the things I said, like being on, especially with the team, right? I mean, it's so helpful. But so I have like boxes around here, right? Of just like laptops and gear and hardware. I have like switches, right? I have like several Moroccan switches just sitting here, right? And this is all, gear that like it's kind of cool, right? Because I can get it configured here. The cool thing is that it can be done, right? But the challenge is that it's all being done here now, right? I'm doing this out of my office, right? So as we onboard a new user, right, I have to, we get a laptop, I prepare that laptop for them there. I throw the image on, get it out. I have to call the user, right? Because we're going to be shipping it to the user. We have to have a call where we go, okay, I've actually done some cool stuff where like I remote them in, or do, things like that to get them first time logged in. Because again, we are domain based, right? Domain joined. These computers are domain joined to a domain that runs in Chicago. So you have to get them in. You have to do that first time login, right? It's just a fairly regular and kind of known, right, kind of system setup thing. So I have to do that here, meaning I create VPN tunnel for work, kind of join it to domain. You have to get them on. So there's additional steps and challenges to doing it. We're making it work, right? And I think that's cool, and I think that shows you how extensible, our platforms are. Even Windows server-based platforms, right, that have been around now for decades, right, can be stretched to facilitate that, but it's not designed to, right? So it's kind of like what we started off with, that we don't have a network and infrastructure that was designed for 60 people, right, to work from home and to onboard, offboard, etc. People, when we offboard people, it's like you have to ship the laptop. Like, can you ship the laptop to me now? Here's my address, right? Let's get a FedEx, or can you bring that to the office, right? We're trying to be, safe, right? So the best option is ship it to me, right? Don't go downtown, right? If you don't have to. So there are just a lot of logistical kind of everyday things that that a lot of folks wouldn't think about, right? That are transparent and visible become much more, real.
I find that the last question I have is it seems, I mean, it's technology, so there's just so many different layers. What are some of your sources? And this, I mean, probably the future audience who's going to look at this tape will know, but what are some of your sources for staying on top of things, for understanding how to do the like make these tweaks and these different configurations? Like, where do you get some of your ideas from? What information do you leverage from the industry? Just something that the audience and even myself, I'm interested to learn more about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one space, right? Obviously, there's which makes total sense. I mean, there's, for security stuff, like there's like SANS and stuff like that. Like that, I'm frequently logging into a lot of those like cybersecurity sites. I think there's we have, there is a PE distribution list / group, right, that I found out about at the after the Dynamo conference, right? That actually where we met, right, in Boston.
Yeah.
One of the PE directors there shared that there's a distribution group or list, right, for a group, and that's pretty interesting, right, because you'll get a lot of shared experience, of course, and so you can kind of go back and forth on that. I do a lot of boot camps and stuff, and when you do boot camps, right, for certifications, and you have access to the company who provides that. So like, again, InfoSec is one that I like. And so I can use them as a resource for a variety of questions I have. And then your tried and true, Windows, right, blogs and sites, right, for all the Windows-based stuff and Office 365 stuff. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of of comprehensive kind of training and doing that on a yearly basis, right? I know you do this too, right? And that is that pays off, like the CISSP, right, that we've talked about. Like there has just been so much in that boot camp, that InfoSec, there's so much, right? I've learned things and some techniques and things that like just in that, right? So I'm a huge advocate for hitting those boot camps for different certs, but they're bigger. They can be more impactful than just that specific cert. Right.
It's so interesting because I mean, I have to have you on for another show, but that's like a whole big debate on certifications versus experience versus this. Look, like you, I mean, anyone can go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm a huge fan of certs. I'm not only a fan, I'm actually an active participant, right? So, but yeah, because outside of conversations like this, it's rare you get to talk to someone outside of your firm or the situation to even know what's going on. And I think sometimes with the training, with the certs, it helps you do that. Okay, this is what's going on in the issue. This is interesting what they do. And then obviously professional organizations like the one you mentioned, the PE list that unfortunately I can't become part of because of certain consultant situations. But yeah, so those types of things help extremely note. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure from our audience perspective, someone will hear what you just said and leverage those similar resources. So thanks for sharing that. Ryan, it's been great. Thank you very much for being a guest. I'm historically, even though I say 12:30, I always go over, and I really appreciate you sticking with me because it's always like the guest like you, just so much expertise, and there's just so many questions and things that we could dive into. So I really appreciate you sticking through and lending your expertise and for this show and joining us for sure. If you want to plug any Twitter handles, any links that our audience or people viewing this can keep in touch with you, this is your time to do so.
Not my space, man. Social media. I really don't have any presence in social media. But you're making me rethink that, Nnamdi, with the invitation. So I think I'm going to have to start building my brand. Right?
Yeah, dude. I'm a huge fan of it because you know what? I'm a fan of it. It's not the people watching it now, right? It's someone who's going to search for something around PE next year, and our video is going to pop up. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, wow. I do know, like, it was so many informative videos I've seen in technology that I contact the person a year after they speech. I contact them on LinkedIn, like, listen, I saw your speech was really good. I want to learn more about it, or I want to keep in contact with you. And they graciously accept. So
Right.
Once you put it out there, it lasts forever. Just as long as we're not putting anything out crazy, I think we should be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. That's cool. I'm happy, and again, happy to be on. And thanks for inviting me, man.
All right, thank you for coming. All right, that's our show, guys, and we are out. Have a great weekend, Ryan. To all those watching, make today great, make the weekend better. Cheers.
Cheers.